This conference will now be recorded.
Hello everyone, good evening. Thank you for joining day one session of API automation testing using Postman tool. I'm sharing my screen. One of you please confirm if my screen share is visible. Guys, am I audible or is my screen share coming up your side?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. So yesterday we have completed a quick demonstration of the course curriculum and what we are going to teach. And today the course actually start, like I said yesterday. So we're starting off with chapter 1. And in chapter 1, today we will talk about the introduction towards the world of APIs. What exactly is an API? Why do we need it? All those things is what I'm going to make it clear. So let's start with certain basic things, right? We are talking about API. So API actually stands for Application Programming Interface. That is the abbreviation for APIs. And obviously, knowing the full form is not that important, but understanding the definition is pretty much important. So I'm going to give you a definition as well as diagrammatical understanding of diagrammatical understanding of how to understand or comprehend an API. So for that, I'm going to take a small module. So let's say we are talking about an e-commerce application. Let's say this is the e-commerce application we are talking about. And I request everyone to be on mute when you join. Yeah. So to make it clear what exactly is an API, I'm taking this example. Let's say this is an enterprise application, and let's say this is something like https://amazon.in. Assume that we are talking about an amazon.in application, and in this Amazon module, in this Amazon application, let's say we'll talk about 4 modules: module 1, module 2, module 3, module 4. So there are 4 modules, and let's name these modules. Let's say this is my login module, and let's call this as logout module, and let's call this as add items to shopping cart module. Let's call this as make a payment module. Okay, so make a payment module. So these are the 4 modules that we will consider to understand what exactly is an API. Okay. Now let's say I wanted to log out after I have logged in into Amazon.in application. So when I wanted to log out, what is the prerequisite? The user should be logged in, right? That is something which we all know. So login module and logout module are dependents, right? Without login, you cannot log out. But that is in theory. But in practicality, how does the logout button on the Amazon.in application or Flipkart or Gmail or Outlook or any xyz.com application knows that the user is logged in? You are seeing logout button, so you know you are logged in, but how does the automation code or how does the programming code knows that the user is logged in? So you need to understand that any time the user clicks on a logout button or a logout link, internally it will make a function call to the login module. Okay? Through the code written by developer, there is a function call that happens, and this function call from logout to login is like a request, and the request says the current user wanted to log out, so please tell me if the user is actually logged in. Then what logout module does is it will say, let me check the database. Okay, so it will say, let me check the database and find out whether the user is logged in or not. And then probably after a few milliseconds, there comes a response from the login module to the logout module, and the response could be yes, the user is logged in, or no, the user is not logged in. Accordingly, the logout module will take actions like it will log you out or it will say login first. So here you see there is a communication happening between two modules. And let me write that here, okay? I want to write that statement. So I want to say that logout module is communicating with login module and vice versa, right? Before the user is logged out. Let's remember this here. Similarly, if I take one more example, similarly, if I say the user wanted to make a payment for the items he wanted to purchase. Now, when will you make a payment? Of course, after you are logged in. Without login, you cannot make a payment in Amazon or Flipkart, because only after you are logged in, it will come to know your default delivery address, what is the default mode of payment, and do you have any coupon codes, etc. Right? So we all know that make a payment definitely depends on login module, right? So when the user clicks on make a payment, this will also make a function call to login, an internal function call through the code written by developer to find out is the user logged in because he wanted to make a payment. So login module says, let me check my database and see if the user is logged in. And then it gives back a response. And the response is like, yeah, the user is logged in, or probably the user is not logged in. Accordingly, make a payment will take decision. Now, assuming that the user is logged in, so make a payment got a response that the user is logged in. Now that the user is logged in, what is the second prerequisite? Make a payment has to check whether there are any shopping items in the cart, right? Without items in the shopping cart, you will not make a payment, right? So this will make a function call to add items to shopping cart and says, looks like the user Kiran is logged in and he wanted to make a payment. But tell me, did he add any items in the shopping cart? So this will check with internal database again and find out whether the user has made any items in the shopping cart. And then add items to shopping cart will give back a response saying, yes, Kiran has like 3 items in the shopping cart. And then only my payment will be successful. So again, if you see here, let me write it. So make a payment module and login module, okay, or communicating with each other. If you see the orange lines. Similarly, if you look at the green color lines, here we can see that make payment module and add items to shopping cart or communicating with each other. Okay, let me change the color so you can see it better. So you see here all the modules are communicating with each other, right? The question is, how are they communicating with each other? If I talk about human beings, we communicate because we speak languages. Every person has an organ called a mouth, and then you speak, and the opposite person has an organ called ears, so they can listen. But here the modules are not human beings, right? So how do they communicate with each other? Obviously there must be a technology that helps them to communicate, right? And that technology that we are talking about is nothing but APIs, which is nothing but application programming interface, right? So now I'll write the definition of an API, because diagrammatically I have given you proof what exactly is an API, right? So I'll just paste that here. Now if I write the definition, it should be clear to you. So what is the definition of an API? An API enables data transfer or data communication across multiple modules in an enterprise application. Okay, so this Amazon.in application, I'm calling it as an enterprise application, and the logout module and login module are communicating. Make a payment and add items to shopping cart are communicating, which means they are exchanging requests and responses. That I'm calling it as data transfer or data communication. Who is transferring the data? Some modules, which means I have written across multiple modules. So when multiple modules are exchanging data, they need a technology to support it. That technology is nothing but API technology today. And APIs are in existence at least from the last 20 years. It is not something that has come yesterday or day before yesterday. From the last 20 years, we have this API technology. Okay. This is a standard definition that you get even if you search in Google or if you read any books. Okay. Another way to define an API is, if I look at this diagram, but before I continue, I just want a quick confirmation, guys. I hope you're all clear with my explanation until now. Is that right expectation, or you have any questions until this point? Okay. Thank you, Amit. Okay. And if you have questions, guys, do not hesitate to put it on the chat. You can always put any message on the chats. Yeah. Now, let me define it in a different way, right? So here, if you see, we are talking about multiple modules, right? Now, logout module is sending a request to login module, right? So logout module is sending a request to login module, and login module is sending a response to logout module, right? So there must be a nomenclature or terminology that we follow here. So the one that's sending a request is called as consumer, and the one that's giving a response is called as producer. So make a payment is talking to login, so make a payment is my consumer, right? So I will write down here, make a payment is sending a request because it wanted to know whether the user Kiran is logged in or not. So this guy is called consumer. Let's put this in some red color. Okay. Similarly, logout module is sending a request to login module because it wanted to know whether the current user Kiran is logged in. And then the login module is giving responses, right? So this guy login is called as producer. Similarly, add items to shopping cart is also giving responses that Kiran has added these many items. So that guy is also called producer. Now, another way to define the API definitions are, I will say, an API acts as an intermediary to transfer the data between a producer application and consumer application, or I can say between a producer. Okay, fine, this should be okay. So this is another way to define an API. Okay, and I'll put the diagram here. So these are the two definitions that I can give it to you, and these are the common ways to understand what is an API. Am I clear, guys, until this point? Is my voice clear for everyone? Razia says my voice is breaking, but how about others? Am I clear? My voice is clear? Okay, everyone says clear. So Razia, please cross check from your side if there is an issue with the internet, or probably there is a problem with the speaker or earphones that you are using. Please cross check and let me know. Thank you. Okay, so I hope everyone has clear understanding of what is an API now, right? It's nothing but an application programming interface, and it is something that transfers the data from one module to another module, right? Now, if I take some simple examples to make it clear, right? Now, see, I am teaching you something, right? From 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. I'm teaching you. So by the time I complete the training today, it becomes 10 p.m. late night for me, right? Let's say I have not prepared dinner for me. So what do? I order dinner from a nearby restaurant. Probably I use a food app, food delivery app, something like this. Okay. So when I make an order on Swiggy, what happens is there are three people involved here. Okay. So three actors are involved here. One is Kiran, who is making the order, right? So he is the consumer because I am making the order. And this order goes via Swiggy app to a nearby restaurant of my choice, and the restaurant guy is preparing the food, right? So he is the producer. And who is bringing the food for me? Not Kiran, right? Not the restaurant guy. Some intermediate guy is there in between called Swiggy. So that guy is acting as an API or intermediary. So this definition also, if you see, this is same as what I have written here. An API acts as an intermediary to transfer the data between a producer application and consumer application. So this simple example of any food delivery that you do, or booking a taxi, or booking a movie ticket, booking a holiday, booking a flight ticket, or a train ticket, or a bus ticket, all these things use API technology. Right? And coming to the projects, coming to the real-time applications that uses APIs, right? There are hundreds of applications we can talk about. So I'll talk about few examples of applications that uses APIs, right? So I'll say examples of applications that uses APIs. The list is never ending, guys. So I can say when it comes to taxi related apps, right? Taxi booking apps. In India we have Ola, Uber, Rapido, etc. So many are there, but let's talk about the ones that we know. And if I talk about food delivery apps, we have Swiggy, Zomato, etc. So many other apps that we have. They're all using APIs. And movie booking apps or websites, okay, not only apps. Probably, we have something called Book My Show, Just a Ticket, etc. And then if you talk about social media apps, right, the famous Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, etc. They all use APIs, right? And then the list is never ending, guys. Whatever apps that you have installed on your smartphone, 99% of them are using APIs, which means without APIs, there is no existence for Ola, Uber, Rapido, Swiggy, Zomato, Book My Show, etc. etc. Assume that the technology APIs are not there. Ola would not have existed, at least the way it is today. Or Swiggy would not have existed. Book My Show would not have existed. Social media would not have existed the way it is. So APIs are the secret sauce for the success of all the apps that we use every day these days. Okay, that's the importance of APIs in the industry. Okay? And since all the latest web applications or mobile apps for Android or iOS, they're all making use of APIs. Naturally, there is a demand for API developers. And since API developers are in demand, the industry says we need someone who are specialized in API testing, and hence naturally there is an increase of demand for API testers as well. Now, since the apps are getting deployed fastly onto the production and Play Stores and App Store, they wanted automation to be there in API testing. Hence, today, when you look at the job opportunities or market, no one says we are looking for a manual test engineer. Even if they say they are looking for a manual test engineer, they automatically mean they need one API test engineer also. Because API test engineer has become a default skill set now. It's a default skill set. It is no longer a specialized skill set. You cannot proudly say that I know API testing, because it has become a default thing like manual testing. Anyone who wants a job in manual testing should also be good at API testing, either manual or automation. Okay, so that's the importance of APIs, because every application that you see today, they are making use of APIs. Hence, there is a growing demand for API developers and API testers. That's a quick introduction, guys, I have. And there is a question from one of the participants. These application modules can be on the same server to use APIs, or do they have to be on separate servers? Good question. It can be anything, meaning so whatever diagram I have drawn, right? Add items to shopping cart and make a payment are talking to each other. So should they be present on the same server or different servers? The answer is anything. Even if they are on the same server, we can use APIs. Even if they are on different servers, we can still use APIs. So APIs will help us to communicate from one server to another server or within the same server as well. Okay. Okay. I hope that answers your question. So what we have discussed is just the first point right now. Now, another thing that I wanted you guys to know is I said that these modules are talking to each other, they are communicating with each other, and I wrote a nice definition that these API modules are communicating with each other, they are transferring the data. The question is, in which format are they communicating the data? if I talk about Kiran versus the audience in the training, I'm communicating with you, I'm transferring my knowledge to you using English as a mode of communication. Because as human beings, we speak English, and English becomes kind of universal language to exchange data. But how are APIs doing the data transfer? So do they talk in English, or do they talk in Spanish or Hindi or some other local language like Telugu or whatever? No, right? They're not human beings. So APIs also need some kind of language to transfer the data. So that's what I'm going to answer here. So when these APIs are communicating with each other, they, okay, I'll take a screenshot of this, put it in the document. Yeah, so what I wanted to say is, how are these APIs communicating between multiple modules? That I would like to answer now. Just like human beings have got languages to speak, APIs also have got some languages to exchange data. So uh, one second. So so APIs uses something like, let me change the font, the size. Okay, so APIs uses these kind of data descriptive languages. Like initially, the developers used text as the mode of communication between any two modules when they're using API technology. Later, they have shifted to HTML as the mode of communication to transfer the data from one module to another module using APIs. Later, they shifted to XML, and right now they are using JSON, and few organizations are using YAML also. So these are the data descriptive languages, meaning the developers will use these languages so that logout module can talk to login, so that login can talk to logout, or make a payment can talk to add items to shopping cart, and add items to shopping cart can talk to make a payment. Now text is pretty much outdated today. We don't use text as the format. Today we don't use text. Similarly, HTML is also pretty much outdated when it comes to APIs. XML is also outdated, and JSON is the latest one that the industry is using. And I will say XML is like 90% outdated. Text and HTML formats are completely outdated. XML, few organizations are still using it, whereas JSON and YAML are the latest ones that developers use these days. So these are the data descriptive languages used to transfer the data from one module to another module. Okay, let's put it on the document as well. Right. So what you have to understand is, APIs, when developed in an enterprise application, uses below data descriptive language formats to for data transfer or communication across multiple modules in an enterprise application. So what are they? Let's write down one more time. So we use text format or HTML, XML, JSON, YAML. Okay. And like I said, the first two formats are pretty much outdated. And the third format is 90% outdated. The last two is what the industry is actually using it. Okay, let me see if there are any questions. Renuka says, how is API and middleware related? So Renuka, that will be addressed when I'm teaching you this topic. In chapter 1, which is scheduled for tomorrow or day after tomorrow, you will get an answer to your question. In fact, shortly, if I have to answer it, APIs are developed in middleware application. Razia has a question. I have a point of sale application which generates a receipt for every transaction. A receipt is generated by an app server, and transactions are reflected in client and server, which is a web portal managed by a bank. Here, which one is considered as API? See, whenever you click on make a payment, Razia, an API call will be made to the other system to figure out whether the payment has been received or not, and the other system gives back a response. So here I would say the app server itself is making use of your APIs. Okay. Okay. Am I clear until this point to everyone? Let me help you understand. We just covered these 2 points. What are APIs? An introduction towards data description formats. Okay. And if you are interested to know how the syntax looks like, right, for HTML or text, I can probably talk about that also. So an example of a text format so that you understand how does a text format looks like. Right. So text format example. Then I'll show you HTML, XML, and JSON. So when I talk about HTML format, it typically looks like this. The developers use this kind of syntax. As a test engineer, you don't have to know about it. I mean, you don't have to remember how to write it because developer writes it, but at least we should know how the format looks like. So you will have something like this. And these are the starting tags and ending tags that we have. And then here you have something called message. And here we write the message. The message can be, this is API class. So this is how HTML format looks like when developed by a developer. Similarly, if you wanted to see how XML looks like, I'll write it down. So here you will have XML, here you will have XML, and sometimes you will have something like envelope. This could be something else, how an XML format looks like when written by a developer. If you see the word XML, that's enough. It's an example of XML. If you see the word HTML, it's an example of HTML. When it comes to text format, there is no syntax. There is no syntax for text format. So it's like whatever I have written, there is no syntax for text format. You can consider that itself as your what do you call syntax for text format. It just follows free format, like the way you chat on WhatsApp. It's an example of text format. And coming to JSON, right, that's very much important for us because the industry is using JSON only. So how does JSON look like, right? So first I have to tell you JSON syntax. And to tell you what is JSON, it stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So it is a format in which data can be transferred from one module to another module. It stands for JavaScript Object Notation. And a few more things is it is lightweight format. It is more secured. It is more robust, etc. You Google it, you get all those things. That's not pretty much important because we are not developers, but the basic information you have to know. And coming to the syntax, right, it follows a key value pair structure. Now, what is that key and value? Key is like a question, value is like an answer. So it starts with a flower bracket like this, and in between you will have the keys. Every key is associated with a value. And if you have more keys, you should separate them with a comma. The moment you are done, remove the comma in the last one. So this is the syntax. This is a simple syntax I'm giving you for JSON. It follows a key and value. Key is like a question, value is like answer. Let's say I wanted to give you an example. So I'll just copy the syntax. And in the place of key, I will say trainer name. So what is the trainer name? You write any name. Let's say my name, Kiran. And what is the course being taught? So I'll say course name, API automation testing. And what is the tool that we are using in this course? Postman. And what is the duration of the course? Let's say 30 hours. And the mode of training, it's an online live training, right? So this is an example of a JSON format. So you write anything in the key and anything in the value. And this is one way how login and logout module communicates, or make a payment and add items to shopping cart, or any two applications, any two modules communicate in an enterprise application if we are using JSON format. As a test engineer, we should know at least the syntax of JSON and an example format, so that when you see it in the project, no confusion should come to us. Am I clear to everyone on these formats? Whatever I have done here, am I clear, guys? Confirm it to me on the chat, please.
Clear, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have just concluded the first 2 points. Now comes the very important topic, client and server architecture. Now listen to this very carefully, because this is pretty much important when you are doing the actual automation testing in Postman tool or any other automation tool. So I'm going to talk about the client and server architecture now. I'm sure you are all aware of what is a client and what is a server, right? So with that assumption, I will also give you definitions. Do not worry about that. So this is the client and this is the server. So we need to know what exactly is a client. So a client is nothing but any application or a device that sends a request to the server. Then what is a server? It is also a device or an application that receives client request to analyze it, then to process it, then to give a response back to the client. So we are talking about client and server architecture, in case if you are a little confused what we are discussing now. And we need to have some examples of client, right? So what are the applications that we use are called as clients? Can anyone take an example? What is an example of a client? The definition is clear, right? Client and server architecture is what we are talking about now. Anyone says an example of a client? Okay, let me write the definition. A client is an application or a device that sends a request. And a server is an application or a device that receives client request to analyze it, to process it, and to submit a response to the client. Okay. Now, example of a client is browser. Every day we use browser, right, to submit a request. Like gmail.com I type, so that's a request. I type outlook.com, I type linkedin.com, facebook.com, amazon.in. Those are all the requests, and I'm using a browser. So browser is the world favorite client. Another client that we are talking about in this course is Postman tool. Okay. Similarly, if I'm teaching you Selenium, Selenium is the client. If I'm teaching you Jmeter, Jmeter is the client. If I'm teaching you rest assured is the client. If you're using Eclipse editor or IntelliJ editor, that is the client. And coming to examples of servers, we have so many servers. We have application servers, web servers, hardware servers. So example of application or web servers is like we have Apache Tomcat, we have Nginx, then we have Microsoft IIS, then we have IBM WebSphere, then we have Glassfish. These are the application servers or web servers. If you are looking for hardware servers, we have them from AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, Control-S, which is a third-party provider. So these are few examples of servers, both from a hardware perspective, from a software perspective. Now that we know what is a client, what is a server, and examples of client and server, let's move forward to understand the client and server architecture in depth. Okay. Before I do that, there is a question from a participant. These key pairs are understood by the application or this coded in the application to answer and process. So the answer is the key and value pairs are understood by the producer application and consumer application, meaning it is understood by the modules present in a software. And Vaibhav says JSON always will be in the dictionary format like in Python data type, kind of. Okay. Yes, that the answer is yes, Vaibhav, kind of. Now coming to the client and server architecture, we know that client sends a request to the server, right? So let's draw a line here. So I say that the client is sending a request to the server and the server is giving a response. From the server, the client is getting a response. So let's write down here that the client is sending a request, and I'll call it as API request because we are talking about APIs. And whatever answer we are getting from server, it's a response. Let's call it as API response. Now we need to understand what exactly is called as a request and an example of a request also. So anything that you type on your browser can be a request, right? So example, if I type here, I hope my screen share is visible. Yeah. So here I'll type a request. Let's say I'm typing amazon.in, and that's the request, right? So amazon.in is the request I'm typing. So I'll put here the examples of request. And you see I've got response also from Amazon. This is in HTML format, right? Any website will always give you response in HTML format. So here I will say that you got the response in HTML format. Let me give you one more example of a request. So this is another request I'm typing on my browser. You see here the request is http bin.org/json. That's one example of a request I'm typing. And did we get a response from server? The answer is yes. You see something got printed on the browser. This is the response and it is in JSON format. You can see flower bracket starting, key and value pairs are there. So we got a response from server and it is in JSON format. Let's put it here. Let's take one more example. So I'll type http bin.org/xml. Press enter. Let's see if we get a response. Yes. So this is the request I've sent it to server on the browser. And we also received response from the server. If you see it, we got it in XML format. Here you can see this is in XML format. It says this XML file, right? So whenever you are testing the applications or APIs, the response can come from server in any format. It can come in HTML format, JSON format, XML format, text format, or YAML format, or any format it will come. So remember that when you're testing APIs, the responses will come in any format. Okay, so that's the definition of client and server, but that's not the entire architecture model. When the client is sending a request, the client also sends something called as a protocol. So every request is accompanied by a protocol. And I'm sure you're all aware of what is a protocol, right? A protocol is a set of rules, a set of guidelines, a set of standards that decides how client and server should communicate with each other, right? So if I write down here the definition, I'll say a protocol is a set of rules and regulations that guides how client and server can communicate with each other. That is the standard definition of protocol which you have read in your college days, or you know it in general. And there are multiple examples of protocols in the world, right? So examples of protocols will be, you have HTTP protocol, HTTPS protocol, FTP protocol, MQTT protocol, IMAP protocol, POP3 protocol, SMTP protocol, file protocol, SQL protocol, JMS protocol, LDAP protocol, etc. So there are hundreds of protocols in the internet, and every protocol has a purpose, in the internet. But in API automation testing, whether it is Postman tool or any other tool that you are learning, there are two protocols that you have to remember, because we use extensively these two protocols. One is HTTP, the other is HTTPS. These are the two important protocols we have to learn, and we use only these protocols in API testing. And we know that HTTPS is a secured protocol and HTTP is an unsecured protocol. I'm sure everyone is aware of it, but I'll talk a little bit about this in my notes. So to talk about HTTP protocol and to also talk about HTTPS protocol, I'll put HTTP in red color because it is not recommended to be used because it's unsafe. So HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. That is the full form. And the purpose of this protocol is to transfer data in any format between client and server. Meaning client and server can exchange data in any format, like text format, HTML format, JSON format, YAML format, XML format, PDF format, document format, video format, audio format, image format. All the formats are supported by HTTP protocol. The problem with HTTP protocol is it transfers data in plain text format, which is unsecured. So whatever data client is sending to server using HTTP protocol, it goes in plain text format, which means if the client is sending a message that, hey, the username is Kiran and the password is Kiran123, any hacker can see the password, any hacker can see the username, because HTTP protocol transfers it in plain text format. Hence, this protocol is regarded as an unsecured protocol. So we don't recommend the usage of HTTP protocol in the projects. Okay, and to fix this problem, HTTPS protocol has been designed by the industry, which is nothing but the advanced version of HTTP. So it is also same full form, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, just that it has got the security feature. It is also used to transfer data in any format between client and server. You can transfer in any format, and it transfers the data in encrypted format, which is secured. So if I'm using HTTPS protocol, meaning my developer is using HTTPS protocol in the software, and if the username is Kiran and password is Kiran123, the hacker cannot see the original username. The hacker cannot see the original password. He will see some junk text like 123 ABCD dollar, etc., etc. Hackers will not understand the encrypted format. Only server and client can understand this. So your data is secured only if you use HTTPS protocol. That's why all the banking applications or any website for that matter today, where you are logging in, booking something, making a payment, they all use HTTPS protocol. Okay. So how did the industry converted HTTP to HTTPS protocol? So the answer is uh, the HTTP protocol, when combined with SSL protocol, came HTTPS. And SSL is it stands for secure sockets layer. So it's a cryptographic protocol that is used for encryption algorithms. So SSL algorithm is used in HTTP, and then HTTPS is formed. But today SSL is like little outdated. Okay, so I'll say SSL is outdated. So SSL is little outdated today because there is a better version of SSL. So the industry says use TLS instead of SSL. So when you use TLS certificate with HTTP, HTTPS comes, and the TLS stands for Transport Layer Security. That is a full form, and TLS is the latest version in the market today. So your developer should use actually TLS but not SSL in the HTTPS algorithm. So this is some security testing that we can do as well. And within TLS, what happened is initially the industry came with TLS version 1.0, then it became outdated because the hackers are able to reverse engineer and find the passwords and sensitive data. Then TLS version 1.1 came into picture. Later it also became outdated because the hackers are able to decrypt your personal data. Then the industry came with the TLS version 1.2. Later this also became outdated because hackers are able to decrypt it. Finally today we have version 1.3, which is latest, and hackers are having little difficulty in decrypting the data. So therefore we recommend the developers to use TLS version 1.3. So whenever I say HTTPS is secured, it can be SSL algorithm or TLS algorithm. TLS is latest, SSL is outdated. So do not encourage developers to use TLS. Within TLS, we have version 1.3, which is latest. Okay, that's also one of the interview questions, common interview questions. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is when we are talking about APIs and in the client and server architecture, the APIs will definitely have the protocol, and that protocol has to be checked whether it is SSL or TLS. Let me show you practical evidences to you so you understand it, and let me know if you have any questions. Now here if you see Isha website, right, and here you see we are using HTTPS protocol, and if you click on this icon it says connection is secured, and whatever information I submit on this website, like if I make a payment of 6,900, is it safe or not? That is what it is saying. But the question is HTTPS using SSL or TLS by Isha Training Solutions? Let's find it out. What you can do is just right click on your browser, click on the last option, inspect, and here you will have an option called security. Okay, here it is. So I see security here. Okay, and now here it says a message reload to view the details. So I'm just refreshing my browser, and here you can see main origin ishatrainingsolutions.org. Click on it, and here you can see what is the protocol they are using. So here you can clearly see that Isha website is using latest TLS, not SSL. Within TLS it is using latest version, which is 1.3, which means this website is completely safe and secure. Not every website has to use 1.3. There are few websites which still uses 1.2. Let's find out another website. Okay, let's say um, some website, bookswagon.com, and you see it is using TLS version 1.2, little outdated version because 1.3 is the latest, not 1.2. So this is like an e-commerce application where people purchase books. So this is using TLS 1.2. This is how we find out the security testing for APIs in the Postman tool or directly on the browser like this. So this is the second thing that you all have to remember when I talk about protocol. Okay. Let me take a pause here. Anyone has questions until this point? I'll do a quick recap of what we did. So we discussed about what is an API. We discussed about examples of APIs. We discussed about the data description formats. We started with client and server architecture. We did not complete it because I need even tomorrow's class to complete it. So I'll save this diagram on my downloads. So I'll create this folder API 9 p.m. and this is client and server architecture. And what I'll do is whatever notes I'm writing, I'll put it on my Google Drive here. So this is the rough notes I'm writing, API rough notes new, I will call it as. And whatever I have written here, I'll just put it over here. Okay, so this way all my data will be automatically saved. Okay. And it will come here once this is saved. Okay, this is what we have discussed. Pooja has a question. Is TLS a certificate or algorithm? The answer is it's an encryption algorithm, Pooja. It's not a certificate. And we purchase those certificates. Okay, developers will not develop it. It's automatically purchased and then added to the HTTP protocol. Okay, Amit says, can we get this document? Answer is yes, Amit. All the people who are making the payments will get access to the notes, which means my Google Drive and also the recordings. But the notes and the recordings will be given access, soon after anyone makes the payment. The first two classes are like, kind of initial classes that I'm offering for every participant so that they can take a wise decision whether to enroll in this course or not. But yes, the answer is like, yes, we will definitely give you access. Okay, so right now I'm just making everything over here. Cool. So that's all I have for today's class, everyone. So quick recap, we just discussed about client and server architecture. We just completed some 30% of the discussion. We still have a lot of things to discuss about client and server, which will be useful in the API automation testing process. Okay. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. So if you have liked this session and you're feeling comfortable with my explanation, finding it useful, please proceed with making payments. My backend team, Isha team, is going to assist you with all kind of information. You can obviously post a message on the WhatsApp as well if you want me to answer any of your questions. Okay. So on that note, I think we are good for sign off today. Thank you very much for your active participation, guys. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye bye.